Hi, and welcome to the Saved, Healed, and Made Whole podcast, where holistic health really can be simple, affordable, and attainable for you and your family. I am your host, Kayla J. Esteban. I am a biblical naturopathic doctor at SOZO Holistic Healing, where I work with natural-minded moms to find healing in mind, body, and spirit. So go grab your favorite cup of herbal tea, take a deep, relaxing breath, and we'll get started. So if you've been in my space for more than just a minute, like if you've had some time to take a look over my website, maybe see some social media, you might have seen this phrase that I use quite often talking about health in mind, body, and spirit. So I just wanted to take this time to really talk about what exactly that means if you're not familiar yet, and not only what it means, but why it's so important. Because I think most people, just the general population, will think about health more in the physical sense, right? Like something hurts, I have a pain, I have some kind of sickness symptom, right? And then I go to the doctor to make it better and the symptoms go away. And that's kind of what people, I think, generally think of as healthcare. And more commonly, recently, maybe in the last, 10, 15 years or something, mental health has been more of a common awareness. And there's been a lot more people going to therapy. And I think the general kind of treatment besides therapy is just pharmaceuticals. And what I see, even though I am glad that more people are recognizing mental health as an issue and as a health issue, I think that many people have a disservice to them because it's considered like a completely different issue than physical health. And there is not a lot of recognition for how physical health affects mental health and how mental health affects physical health. So, like, for example, you might not know, but if you have depression for longer than 6 months, you are not technically depressed, like not because of your circumstances. You're actually depressed because your body's biochemistry is imbalanced. So even though there may be some kind of like emotional, mental, cognitive root causes in there, it's not entirely physical, but it does have a physical base. Like there is something in your body that's depleting serotonin, or there is something that is like throwing your hormones out of whack. So there is something physical that needs to be addressed. And if you're just sitting there in talk therapy, the years are going to go by and it's not going to get better, because talking, as much as I'm not bashing on therapists in any way, talking really does help in certain situations. But if your depression is longer than 6 months, you cannot address biochemistry depression with talk therapy. It just doesn't work. So this is an example of how mental health affects physical. Another example is cancer. So cancer is getting really big nowadays, and most, if not all of us, know somebody who has had cancer or is currently going through cancer treatment. And cancer is very emotionally based, and this is not recognized as well. But cancer is often related to past trauma or secrets, things that we hold inside or holding in emotions. So if you think about that, like the emotions that we hold in and we don't tell anybody and we don't let them out, and it just kind of builds up on the inside, how that manifests is in a physical tumor, right? Like the physical tumor, like building up inside of us, is a physical reflection of those emotions and those thoughts. So there are these issues that take place in the mind that have a physical manifestation and are really interrelated. And if we don't address the physical and the mental, it just, there's people like cancer, for example, people that they might go through one round of cancer treatment and it seems like everything's fine, and then the cancer comes back because those issues on the mental, on the inside, are not dealt with. And there are other things that I don't necessarily want to call it mental health, but more just kind of like mental blocks. There are things like limiting beliefs. Like you may have, for example, you might have a hard time losing weight because your mind has been programmed at a certain point in your life to use food as a self-soothing mechanism. So that is something in your mind that is reflecting in your physical body. And if, this is why weight loss is such a struggle for so many people, because it's not about counting calories and it's not about exercise, even though those are a factor, right? There's the mental issues, the limiting beliefs, the beliefs about weight, the beliefs about food, and things like that that play a part in the physical. Indecisiveness is another huge one that I see a lot with people. It's a really common issue, and it affects so many things in our lives. When we have chronic indecisiveness, that's kind of a mental block or a limiting belief. It can be hard not only to take care of your physical health, but also making decisions in relationships and business and things like that. Just, we make so many decisions on a daily basis. So these kinds of things don't really fall under the traditional category. I think when we think of mental health, I usually think of like depression and anxiety and bipolar disorder and things like that. But what I consider them as is more like health in the mind, just because it's not really mental health as we typically think of it, but it does take place in the mind. So these kinds of things have a really big influence on how we operate on a daily basis. And removing these mental blocks and limiting beliefs opens up so many more possibilities in life. Using indecisiveness as an example, I had somebody that I worked with once that she just told me that she struggled so much with indecisiveness. And after our session together, I just sent her a follow-up message the next day to see how she was doing. And she said, I have been going back and forth for 6 months on trying to purchase a mattress, and I've never been able to make a decision. And that later that night after our session, I sat down at the computer and I had made a purchase within 15 minutes. And it was a huge success for her, and she was actually finally able to take control. Can you imagine spending 6 months agonizing over this decision only to be able to make it in 15 minutes? So that was really wonderful to be able to celebrate that with her. And even though with that story, it's just a mattress, it's not a huge thing, but just that was the one story from her that I was able to hear. But just imagine how much better she is at making decisions on a daily basis. These decisions, indecisiveness, it leads to just a lack of peace in our lives and not being able to trust ourselves, right? So sometimes, even though a client might come to me for a physical health issue, there are some of these mental blocks and limiting beliefs that might actually they might not even be aware of it, or if they're aware of it, they might not see it as kind of a factor in their physical health. But sometimes these things really do need to be removed first in order to have long-term success, because I don't want you to be like a chronic visitor, making sessions with me all the time because your health is not really getting better. I do really want you to have health that lasts for years. I want you to be as successful as possible. So I don't want to just like hand you some protocol to follow and, maybe you try it for a few weeks and then you sort of like fall off the bandwagon because some limiting belief or something like that has prevented you from moving forward. Maybe it's procrastination or indecisiveness or something like that. And then just to be right back where you started, going to a different practitioner, trying all over again. That's not how I want to work with people, and that kind of breaks my heart that so many people have to deal with that on a regular basis. It can be really frustrating and lead to so much discouragement with people who genuinely want to be healthier and are not able to because of these blocks. And so physical health is this going, but sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. So yes, those mental blocks are important, and all of those things. I do also see physical health being important because of how we really do pay attention to it so much more. For most people, like they do come to see me because of a physical health issue. And usually it's like some pain in their body or discomfort, or maybe they have lower energy or a sickness, something that really makes day to day life harder. And this is why people really pay attention to these symptoms first, because it's like it's right in front of us, right? Like if you have a pain, it's really hard to ignore that. It's kind of on that sensory level. So, this is why people really do recognize these things, and it's helpful to pay attention to those, even if sometimes we do need to work on the mental blocks and stuff first. So while we do the mental blocks and stuff like that, a lot of times I will make recommendations to help support physical health. So a lot of times these things are like herbs or supplements or nutritional changes, lifestyle changes. Maybe if I don't really do a ton of body work, so I am happy to refer people to like a chiropractor or something like that. There might be some breath work or something else that can really support the physical body while we're overcoming these limiting beliefs and mental blocks and things like that. I do some of these recommendations, but to be honest, I'm a little more kind of conservative and choosy with these recommendations compared to probably most practitioners. Just what I've observed, it seems like most practitioners will focus exclusively or almost exclusively on these kinds of recommendations. And the reason why I'm a little more limiting in the things that I recommend is because a lot of times it's more expensive, or like it's more time consuming. Like going to a chiropractor may be really necessary, but it is an extra step out of your day that if I can avoid it, or if I can recommend something that is simpler or faster or more budget friendly, that's definitely what I'm going to do, because I do want things to be as accessible and manageable for you as possible. So, whenever I do recommend something, it's genuinely because it's a really, really good quality product that I may have muscle tested in your body that is necessary for the short term. But that is really the goal for me, is that to not, like, ideally, I don't want you to be dependent on anything. It should be something that, like, maybe you need just to get you over to the hump, or maybe you need to kind of help rebuild your health for the next 6 to 12 months or something like that. But ideally, long-term use should not be necessary. And this is really what pharmaceutical companies want to do, right? Like they want to create a lifetime customer. If you get diabetes or hypertension or something like that, they generally, like, you walk into the doctor, they give you the prescription, and in theory, you're supposed to just take this for the rest of your life, right? And then maybe you add on more symptoms and more pills and things like that. And I don't want that for you. I want you to have freedom in your life. I don't want you to be stuck, even if it is kind of a healthier option, even if it is nutritional supplements or herbs or something like that. I still don't want you to have to be taking the same herb every single day for the rest of your life, right? That to me is not freedom in health. That is just a a different kind of dependency that maybe has less side effects. So, if you have been taking something or doing some kind of protocol or a certain service, like going to the chiropractor regularly for the past 9 to 12 months, it may be time to reevaluate if that is necessary. And it might still be, if you're listening, I don't know your story yet, probably. So, that's something that would need to be muscle tested. And that's why I do put a lot of value in muscle testing, because it's not a guess, and it's not just my assumption, and it's not just me trying to sell you on something. It is me asking, like, your body specifically what you need and how often you need it. Maybe you've been taking a supplement every single day for the past like 9 months or something, and if I do some muscle testing and find out maybe you only need to be taking it 3 times a week or something like that, can you imagine how much you can save by cutting in half how many times you need to take it in a week. Or going to the chiropractor, maybe you've been going on a weekly basis and maybe you really only need to go like once a month now because you've kind of gotten over that hump of the immediate pain and things like that. So it's like taking that time to reevaluate can be really helpful, even if it is something that you do need to be taking in the long term. Especially like with herbs and supplements, it's not considered to be good to just take it constantly because our bodies really do need a break. So there might be something that you need to take a break for like a month or for 2 weeks or something like that, just to give your body just that little like rest time. Like our bodies need a vacation even from processing supplements and things like that before starting again. So that could be something that's really helpful for you. That might be something that your body's needing. You might find with muscle testing that you're able to drop something entirely. Sometimes I see people and I ask like what they're taking, and they're taking like 10 different supplements or something like that. And I always wonder, I don't think that they actually need to be taking that much. Like, let's take a look at it and see which ones are actually necessary, because to me, there's no reason why you should be needing to spend like $500 a month on supplements, right? And so that's my kind of view on physical health. And lastly, with spiritual health, Western culture in general, from my perception, is severely spiritually ill. And this makes a very big impact not only on people's physical and mental health, but I really see a big breakdown in family systems, difficulties in maintaining romantic relationships, or really any kind of relationships, like social relationships, even work and spending habits and our culture. And I don't know about you, but I feel like I get the sense with other people and hearing their conversations that a lot of people are kind of feeling, at least in America, I can't speak to any other country if you are from a different country, because this is the one that I'm currently living in and speaking with people about. But it seems like the country's kind of falling apart a little bit. So, this I really do believe has a big root in our spiritual health. And if you are not familiar with it, I will just go into some details on what exactly is spiritual health, because it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with religion, even though religion can be a part of it. I know many people today are, especially, I'm a millennial, and many millennials, I think, is very common to be very jaded about organized religion or to have like past religious trauma and things like that. And I understand that, and I can relate, but I see a lot of people, especially my age, but just in general, a lot of kind of exploring options and sometimes kind of getting lost in all of the spiritual options out there. So, if it's not religion, what exactly is spiritual health? So, as best as I can define it, spiritual health is our ability to connect with our inner self, with nature, with other people around us, and with our higher power. Because everybody, whether we believe it or not, we all have some kind of higher power, right? Even if it's not like a god or a deity, there's always something that is greater than ourselves, right? I think us as human beings were designed to have that recognition of something greater than ourselves. And so this is our spiritual health, this recognition of something that goes beyond us and our own desires, something that gives us meaning and purpose, and when we hold on to it, it gives us peace. This is often where our morality comes in and our virtues, right? Because setting ourselves aside for the sake of other people or for the sake of something greater, for a good cause, is morality, right? And these virtues. And what makes us sick is when we focus too much on ourselves and we practice vices like greed or laziness or living in excess or pride or resentment. And the way that we kind of treat this spiritual sickness is by practicing virtues, the opposite things. So, like gratitude and service and generosity and living in simplicity and humility, things like that. I like to call these spiritual practices spiritual nutrition, because I really see these practices as kind of feeding the soul and really giving strength to the body. And I couldn't tell you exactly the science of how vices like pride or greed cause sickness, even though I do really observe this in people. Saint Hildegard von Bingen, who, if you're not familiar with her, she is a Christian mystic from the Middle Ages and was a recognized doctor of the church. She, to me, is like the original biblical naturopathic doctor, and she got divine revelations about health and spirituality and things like that. And from some of her writings that I've read, at least with one thing, she describes how bitterness and anger can create an excess of something called gallic acid in our body. And she says it basically acts like a poison in our body that causes sickness. So that was her explanation. That was kind of her divine revelation from God for how she would explain it. But I do see this also in the Bible, right, in scripture. So like Proverbs 14:30 says, "A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones." And Proverbs 13:12 says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life." So even if science hasn't fully caught up with an explanation for how this happens, I think we can definitely agree that we see this with our own eyes, and and in spiritual, like in biblical times, they saw this. They saw people like becoming sick, like dying of a broken heart or something like that. Like there's that spiritual relationship with physical health and with mental health. And health always has these layers of root causes, right? If you've had any experience with holistic health and things like that, a lot of times we look for like root cause medicine, what is causing this? And it's not so simple as saying like this is the one root cause, right? There's usually, if not always, there's multiple things that are kind of playing a factor. And the more that I practice with people, the more I see spiritual health as being kind of like the deepest levels of root cause. So to give an example, let's say eczema. So on the surface level, you have your symptoms of eczema, and this is kind of like what is presenting, what people notice first. The root cause underneath that might be environmental toxins, right? Like that causes the toxins in the body to come to the surface and to present as eczema. And underneath that, you might have candida that is being fed by the toxins and creates this eczema. And often underneath that, there is a spiritual root cause of candida. A lot of times it's a lack of self-love, and this can be related to trauma, to your childhood, to mindset things that were programmed with you. So if you go to a typical Western doctor for eczema, they would probably just prescribe you like a topical cream or maybe a steroid or something like that. If you go to a typical naturopathic doctor for eczema, they would probably recommend like maybe a calendula lotion to put on, and they might educate you on eliminating your environmental toxins. They might recommend some herbs like garlic for killing the candida, and they might suggest you go on like a lower sugar and phytic acid diet. So all these things are really great things, and they're things that I would also typically recommend, depending on the person, if it tests as candida and things like that. But I would also go deeper than that. So I would look at something like childhood trauma. Maybe you have a trauma that makes you feel unworthy because of the way that your parents raised you, and that has turned you into a workaholic, and you feel this lack of self-love, like you always need to keep working and striving, and you can't let yourself relax and be at peace and love yourself for who you are. So those spiritual health issues can often present as something like candida, which mixed with the environmental toxins presents as eczema. And then there's other things too, like mindset things. Like if I just told you, well, just, don't eat sugar until the candida's cleared up, you might have some kind of mindset programming that makes you use sugar as like a coping, self-soothing kind of mechanism. And so if I just told you not to eat sugar without removing this mindset, you would, maybe give it a really good try for a week or two or maybe a month, and eventually probably you'll fall off that bandwagon of going without sugar because it's been ingrained in you as this coping mechanism. So, I'm not saying you, by the way, this is just an example. So please don't take anything that I'm saying as a diagnosis of you specifically if you have eczema or candida. I hope this is making sense, kind of this idea of how health in mind and body and spirit is interrelated and how each need really needs to be addressed in order to have long-term success and to have really kind of like a full and complete healing, and how most practitioners, as well-intentioned as they are and as great as they are in their own fields, unfortunately just don't address all of these, especially spiritual health. And so it just goes so unrecognized. And most people, they get a physical pain, they do whatever they need to do in the short term to make the pain stop. And then when the pain is just bearable enough, they stop doing that and they just continue on with their life, right? And that's not what I want for you. I don't want you to just bear it, if it's not such an inconvenience that you can't ignore it, right? I do really want you to have a complete SOZO, saved, healed, and made whole healing. And in order to do that, it has to be in mind, body, and spirit. I don't believe that there is any way around it without addressing all three of those. So if you are ready for your own SOZO, saved, healed, and made whole healing, I have put my contact information in the show notes, and you are welcome to set up a free discovery call with me if you still have any questions, or if you're ready to book your first session, you can also do that by contacting me. There are also some links there where you can take a look around my website if you haven't seen it already, and social media and things like that. I have a free challenge, a refresh 30-day challenge for holistic moms, where you can hit the refresh button on your life and get a jump start on your health in mind, body, and spirit with one simple challenge each day, which is a really great place to start if you are still kind of contemplating or still just kind of want to learn a little bit more about what you might need to do for your health in mind, body, and spirit. So thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you have a very blessed rest of your day, and I will see you next time.